because that just made for honestly one of my favorite reading experiences that I've ever had, ever in my life, period. Hello everyone and welcome back to Mariana Mas Books. My name is Mariana and today I am going to talk about 3 books that I read in high school that I'm glad I reread as an adult. I have talked in videos before about how I have never been a big rereader, which is interesting because I am a big re-watcher. I watch the same movies and shows over and over and over again, and I don't know why I don't do or didn't do the same with books. But lately I have been rereading a lot, and I just completed a reread that was amazing and that I'm so glad I did, and that gave me the idea for this video. As I said, all 3 of the books that I'm going to talk about today were books that I first read in high school. One of them I hated, one of them I loved, and the other one I liked okay. And all 3 of them I loved with my reread. I'm going to start with the book that I hated because it's a book that I've most talked about in my channel, and it is a book that I didn't read with my eyeballs. It is a book I listened to but not on audiobook. I listened to it because it was read to me by my teacher in high school. And so it would be, I guess, maybe questionable to say that I read it in high school, not because I didn't read it with my eyeballs, but because I didn't always pay attention to my teacher. But the reason for that was that I was incredibly bored. And that book is the Mio Cid, or the Poem of My Cid, or the Song of My Cid. There are different ways that you can find it translated in English. I think Penguin has an edition and there are other editions of it. I of course read it in Spanish. I don't remember what edition it was that they read to us in high school. It was probably the Porrua edition that I own currently. This is an epic Spanish poem from the 13th century, 12th or 13th century, so medieval, and it is in the Songs of Deeds tradition, sort of like the Song of Roland, and it concerns the deeds of Rodrigo Diaz de Vivar, who was a knight in Spain, and he's considered like a national hero. The book has some things that can be related to history, and him, the main character, he was an actual historical figure, but the poem is the mythical figure created out of the historical figure. So it is a very romanticized version of his deeds, and some things that are very clearly fiction, very clearly made up for the poem, but it is this tradition of the songs of deeds of big nights. So I think that my teacher was on the right track. My high school Spanish teacher was on the right track when she read it aloud to us, because this is one of those poems that wouldn't have been read. It would have been sung. It is literally a song that would have been sung by the minstrels, and it would have been part of the oral tradition. So I think it was right to read it aloud. However, I think that for reading this poem to high schoolers, you require to give them a bit more context, and also maybe like alongside your read aloud, explain stuff, talk about stuff, like make them excited about what's going on. because I think that even as an adult, not necessarily everyone would be excited about what's going on in this poem. If you have read Beowulf, for instance, it's kind of similar. So they are very exciting poems. They are full of action, they are knights, they are like what we are used to seeing nowadays with shows like Game of Thrones or The Last Kingdom or Vikings. These types of shows that follow great men and leaders of men and action and battles and loyalty to the lords and like houses and bannermen, that type of thing. So it is super exciting, but it is written in a language that is not necessarily what we are used to reading nowadays. Even an adult would struggle with a poem like this if you don't like medieval literature, which I do. But even if an adult would potentially struggle with this, I think high schoolers struggle even more if you don't help them out a bit in giving them context. So I it makes me think of my teacher, my art history teacher in university. She would tell us the history in such a way that you would be absolutely fascinated by what was going on. Now that I'm doing historathon and reading a lot of history, it is honestly amazing to me how exciting the stuff that I learned in school is, but it wasn't exciting when we learned it because they focus on stuff that is not exciting for the age. I'm going on a tangent, but all that to say that I think it's understandable that I hated it and was bored when I read it in high school. Fast forward to my reread this last year, and I absolutely loved the poem. I have multiple videos about it in my channel. I will link the videos in the description. The reason why I decided to reread it was actually for Ancients Athon, which was a readathon that was co-hosted by Jenny at Jennifer Brooks and Tori at Good Strong Words and David at David Wiley, and it's no longer being hosted for obvious reasons. I talked about it also in videos about how influential Ancient Sathon was for me. And completely by coincidence, I read it alongside The Lions of Alrazan by Gabriel, which is a historical fantasy book which concerns or is inspired by the character of the Cid in the Song of My Cid. Part of the story is inspired by him. So reading it alongside that book was absolutely fabulous, and also because I was reading medieval history at the time for Historathon. So all those three things together made it my favorite reading experience of the year. I think I would have loved the poem anyway, but I don't know if I would have loved it as much, like to the level where I'm obsessed, and I currently own 3 editions of the poem, and I would buy more. If there was like a beautiful special edition, I would totally buy it. Like, I don't think I would be at that level of obsession if I hadn't read it alongside those two other books, because that just made for honestly one of my favorite reading experiences that I've ever had ever in my life, period. If you like medieval history, medieval literature, I would highly encourage you to read it. If you like Beowulf, please give this poem a try. I was joking around on Discord a while ago that everyone on BookTube reads and praises Beowulf, but no one reads the poem of my Cid. And I want to be the cheerleader for this poem and put it in the eye of people. I wish I had more followers just so that people would read this poem. loved it. I am so glad I decided to reread it. I'm so glad I decided to give it another chance, because it is a book that in my mind I always said that I would never ever ever in my life read it. And so I'm glad that I did. The next book I'm going to talk about is a book that I thought was okay. I liked it, but didn't love it in high school, and it is The Remains of the Day by Kazuo Ishiguro. This is a book I read when I went on an Ishiguro binge in high school, because I read Never Let Me Go, and I also then watched the movie. I don't remember what order that was. Anyway, read the book, watched the movie, was obsessed. And so after I read that, I read The Remains of the Day. And I did like it, but I didn't love it to the level where I love it now. So that's why I say I liked it. Because after that, I went on to read more Ishiguro. So I mean, I did like it. But again, I wasn't obsessed. I didn't super love it in the way I did when I reread it, I want to say a couple of years ago. Why did I reread this one instead of Never Let Me Go? That is because I had the idea that The Remains of the Day would treat a topic, or would be about a theme that I potentially didn't appreciate in high school, and that I would now appreciate, which was like the passage of time, nostalgia for life. And because I now, because of my illness, I I am fascinated by stories about the end of life and about nostalgia for life. And so I knew that it was, or I had the idea that it was about that, or that it talked about that. And that I probably didn't appreciate that in high school. So I did want to reread it because of that. And then two BookTube friends mentioned that they wanted to read it. And so I told them, hey, why don't we do a body read, all three of us? And I will reread it and you guys read it for the first time. And it was an interesting experience because they both hated the book. Hated the book. Or the main character. I think one of them hated the book, the other just the main character, but loved the book. And I loved both the book and the main character. And it was because of what I thought. Because it is a book that has this theme of the passage of time, and it has an older character that you are following that is reflecting on the passage of time and looking back on his life. And there's this wistfulness, this nostalgia to the book, that just really really spoke to me. And the main character is so tied to duty that that need to follow the rules, to be tied to duty, was very relatable to me. I could understand that personality trait, and so I immediately understood the character and I felt what he was going through. If you don't know, this book follows a butler in England, but he was a butler in a big house in the time of like big houses. And now, as an older man, the big houses in England are not really a thing anymore. If you've watched Downton Abbey, it's very kind of like Downton Abbey, where you do see the decline of the big houses and the change of times, and he is stuck in the past. So you are following him through literally like 2 days break, and he's going on like a road trip for something that I won't spoil, in a 2 day break, and you are just following him, his mind, his thoughts. Nothing happens, you're just following him, reminiscing about his life. Fantastic book, amazing. You can tell why Ishiguro has won a Nobel. And yeah, now I want to reread Never Let Me Go, and I want to give The Buried Giant a chance, because I started it in high school when I went on my Ishiguro binge, and I did not like that book. I DNF'd it, so it was so boring. But it also has older main characters. It follows a couple, and I recently found out that it has Arthurian themes, or it's inspired by Arthurian legend. Of course, I didn't know that in high school, and if you watch the cover of the book, it literally has the Grail. But yeah, so no, not Never Let Me Go, The Remains of the Day. Fantastic reread. I'm so glad I reread it as an adult. It's totally what I thought it would be. Themes I didn't understand, or not that I didn't understand, it's just that when I was, 17, whatever, it didn't speak to me in the way it does now. The final book I'm going to talk about is 100 Years of Solitude by Gabriel García Márquez, which I finished last week, and I am still on a high from that book. I'm still with the obsession. I first read 100 Years of Solitude. I want to say I was also maybe 17 when I read it. I loved it when I read it. I loved it. I remember finishing the book and just sitting on the couch, looking at the void. I think it's the most impactful ending I have ever read in my entire life. So loved it. I have been meaning to reread this. Actually, I think I've been talking about it in videos where I say that I want to reread it, and I just hadn't. And that is because nowadays, this, I don't read a lot of literary fiction. I prefer genre fiction. And also, I was scared about the problematic stuff, which there is a ton in the book. So I didn't know if I was going to like it with my 2024 eyes. I needn't have worried. I loved it. So I had been wanting to reread it, and I was postponing it. And I said I was going to reread it this year because there is a Netflix show coming out, we think in the fall, but there hasn't been an official date announced yet. The trailer for the show came out. And I loved it. I have seen different reactions for it. Personally, I loved it, but I had thoughts. And so I thought, you know what? It was an impulse, and I just started it, and I could not stop. It's just, there's a reason why he won the Nobel Prize. I think I don't want to talk a lot about it in this video because it would be a 2-hour long video. It's one of those books that I'm going to say that I want to make more videos about. But every time I say that, I never do. But I'm going to say that I want to make more videos for 100 Years of Solitude. So all I'm going to say is, in case anyone lives under a rock and doesn't know what it's about, I don't want to say it's about something, because it's not a book that has a straightforward story. If you want to read it, don't expect to pick it up and just read a novel with a straightforward story. Don't. It's not that. But it follows 100 years of a town and a family. The fictional town of Macondo and the Buendia family. And you follow them throughout literally 1 century. The title is literal. I was surprised. When I was reading it, I thought, oh, it's in the title that you are going to suffer 100 years of solitude. That means 100 years of solitude. That's exactly what it means. I saw a review that said this family can't catch a break even if someone throws it at them. And they can't. And that is on one hand because of like personal character conflict reasons, but also because it is heavily inspired and it really depicts Latin American history, which is very tragic in itself. I think that was my favorite thing, and one of the reasons why I was glad I reread it as an adult is because I don't think that in high school I quite grasped the depiction of the like Latin American history, politics, or I don't know if I didn't grasp it. I don't want to say it like that, but I don't think that it would have hit as hard as it did in my 30s. There is so much violence, corruption, abuse, injustice, killings, massacres, all kinds of awful things that are true to Latin American history even to this day. We are in election season and there have been some awful things going on. I don't want to talk about it, but yeah, it's just I feel like the book is Latin America because it's just the language, the imagery, the beliefs. I kind of want to talk more about magical realism in Latin America, but this is not the video for that. But like the way that the people's beliefs, the way that's depicted. I feel myself going on tangents because I now want to talk about my family and the like. No, this is not the video for it, but all that really magical, beautiful aspect, this rich, flavorful aspect of Latin America is there, but also the contrast with the tragedy that is Latin American history. So of course the language, the characters, the stories, the imagery, the poetry that is this book. I do think this whole book is just a poem. All that, of course, in high school, it's why I loved it. But as an adult, it had the added element of these, of course, some of the character struggles that I now as an adult understand more in the same way with like the remains of the day, but also this aspect of the Latin American history, politics. I think that hit even harder as an adult, and it's one of those books that I will probably reread again at some point. And it's one of those books that I feel like every time you reread it at different stages in your life, it will speak differently. I saw someone recently say that that's what makes a classic, and it is that it's a book that you can read and reread and reread, and it says different things. So it has layers, and I think that this is true for this book in an amazing way. Yeah, so those are the 3 books I wanted to talk about. Have you read any of them? Do you want to read any of them? What have you thought? What are some books that you have reread as an adult that you appreciate more? I would love to hear all that in the comments. Thank you so much for watching. I will leave it at that. I will see you soon with another bookish video, and in the meantime I wish you happy reading.